You're listening to a special presentation from Night of the Living podcast, Zoned Out with Freddie and Joe. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Good, Freddie. How are you doing?
I'm good. We're cracking along in this first season of the Twilight Zone. You know?
I know it's rolling along. It's funny because I realize we're still sub 10 as far as the number of episodes we've reviewed, but
Yeah,
it feels like it's been like establishing a legacy.
been a
It's kind
journey.
of fun, right? Exactly.
I just used our volume up a little bit. A few listeners are like, did they just get louder? We did, just a little bit. This week, we're talking about an episode called The Lonely. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a kind of an emotional one, too. Another one of those kind of gut punch ones.
Right. Gets a little deep.
Yeah. So a little bit of housekeeping. We had some feedback on the Discord. If you want to join the Discord, that's for patrons, patreon.com/NOTLP. But author Robert Atone was on there, and he said, listening to the pod about walking distance, which is easily my favorite Twilight Zone episode, and crying. Great episode, guys. Hit so hard.
Oh.
Us middle-aged men, we gotta hold each other up, man.
That's awesome. I love that.
And if you're not familiar with Robert's work, he's a pretty prolific author, both in horror and young adult. And I recommend going and checking him out. His author page on Amazon. He's got some great stuff. And then I also got from a friend of the show, Kyle Miller, sent us. We were talking about in an earlier episode, like for instance, the Unsolved Mysteries soundtrack that they put out that had all the incidental music from all the episodes. He found an album, and it's conducted by Joel McNeely, called Just the Twilight Zone, and it has the 93 tracks on it. So it has all the incidental, like it has broken down by episode, and then the incidental music. So if you're a hardcore fan, I recommend checking that out. It's on all the streaming services.
Right on.
I think it's McNeely and not McNelly. It's either McNeely or McNelly. Joel is the first name of the conductor.
We apologize in advance.
Yeah, if I made a mistake, I'm so sorry. The original air date of the episode we're discussing today, The Lonely, was November 13th, 1959. And this is it's still written by Serling. We haven't gotten to anything that was not, his work in its entirety. But we will next week with Time Enough at Last. But so this is the end of that streak, that 6-episode streak of original stories by Serling. It's 6 cast members, including Serling.
Right.
Which the next few episodes of the show have smaller casts than what we've been.
We broke the 13.
Yeah.
The 13 trend.
The 13 trend is ending, but I think it comes back. The show functions in that area really well between 6 and a dozen cast members.
Yeah, well, and it seems like too, there's got to be some pattern to that idea of you have a certain circle of people or a certain number of people where a level of communication works well, or it's these people, then it's these people, or it's just these people but twice, or something
Right.
along those lines.
And I wonder when we get to the longer episodes how that's going to change the dynamic of the number of characters and everything. But
Right.
I mean, I still think it's ambitious to write for 5 characters for a 20-minute story, but you know, but you need them to move it forward. So do you want to jump in on the synopsis on this? I feel like you're so good at it, Joe.
Well, thank you. I'll do my best to honor that compliment. So we start out and it's you're introduced to basically this place that the intro describes it as a dungeon where we meet our main character, James A. Corry, who's a convicted murderer placed in solitary confinement on an asteroid 9 million miles from Earth. And so it starts out with him talking, or the intro is talking about how he's, on this place by himself, solitary confinement, and this is his kind of effectively his punishment. And by the way, so this is James Corry. This is played by Jack Warden, and he stands out. If you recognize him, he was in 12 Angry Men, I think probably his most prominent role. But if that sounds familiar, that's because another star from the Danny from the 16 millimeter Shrine, the fictional friend of Barbara Jean Trenton, was in episode 4. So another tie back to 12 Angry Men.
What a great movie too.
It is. It's one of those that stands up. It's of its time, definitely, but it's such an archetype for these different types of argumentative styles. So it's a case study in understanding people's communication styles.
Updated too as a play. It was a play originally, and it got updated. Now it's called 12 Angry Jurors. And
interesting.
Yeah, a neighbor of mine was in a local production of 12 Angry Jurors, and so it's a timeless thing. The idea of 12 people deciding the fate of a stranger, like it's almost like a Twilight Zone kind of theme in its simplicity, and watching people kind of argue.
Yeah. Well, and I was first introduced to that in high school as a example of different archetypes of communication styles and arguments and all these sorts of things. And it really is like, it just nails these different personalities. And I think that's the real value it presents, is it's showing you, these are different types of ways that people present themselves, present their arguments, and you can see those archetypes in all kinds of different media. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool. Good review.
Jack Warden is pretty great. And I knew him. I think of him as the old man, Jack Warden, with the mustache and everything. Like his face softens a lot, and he becomes a very lovable looking kind of guy. Like he was in While You Were Sleeping, and that's it's not a great movie. It's the one where Bill Pullman's in like the coma, I think, and he has amnesia, and Sandra Bullock convinces him that they were married.
Okay.
It's a weird movie, but he's in that. I just remember, his face is very striking, I think, especially once the facial hair comes in and he changes in this, he's clean shaven. So you might not even recognize him, but you've probably seen him in a lot of things. He had 165 credits. So
yeah, I should mention in pulling that information that I was from IMDb, you look at the pictures of him and he totally changes. It looks totally different with facial hair and all that. Some people look similar, but he's just like, whoa, that's that guy? Oh, okay. Yeah. So I thought he was two different actors.
Made a big difference in his appearance for sure. But yeah, so that's James Corry, the criminal, is Jack.
Yes. Yep. So he's sitting there and he's sitting in a car, and you find out later that this is a car that was sent there as in parts for him to assemble over the time he's been there. He only gets visited once every 3 months, and when they do, they come by for just a short time. It seems like you find out in the past the visits maybe were longer, but those have shortened, and they're only coming in this latest visit for 15 minutes, but we'll get there in a second. He starts out with a kind of a monologue about he's been there 15 days, 6 months, 4 years, and all the days the same. And he's kind of reflecting, which, ideally, I think the whole objective of conviction and confinement is to have someone reflect. So he's doing a lot of that. He's writing in a journal. He's thinking over things. He's reflecting to himself, and he says, reality is what I need, because what is left that I can believe in? Can I believe in myself anymore? And so he's laying on his bed and kind of gazing up at the sky and processing through it all. And all of a sudden you hear a rumbling in the distance, and you see a rocket land vertically, which, is only possible with very modern rockets from like the 90s on. The first one I found out, I was just curious, was the Blue Origin New Shepard. For those of you who are not familiar with the Billionaire Boys Club of Space Exploration, is owned by Jeff Bezos. So they did that in, I think the first one to do that was like in the 90s, and then Blue Origin did it in the, no, sorry, I was thinking of something else. This one, Blue Origin, did it fairly recently with.
Was that the one with the
vertical
arm?
Landing. No, I don't think so. I think there's one that was caught in like in an arm, and I think that one was a SpaceX rocket.
That was SpaceX,
yeah.
So this story, the Twilight Zone episode we're talking about, takes place between 2046 and 2047.
Okay.
So they still got time.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I forgot to mention,
reality.
that the director of this episode, it's Jack Smite, who did a movie that I remember enjoying, but I understand that it's some people consider it terrible. Is The Illustrated Man with Rod Steiger. It's an adaptation of the Ray Bradbury book. It has like
I've heard.
It's an anthology. It has like 3 stories. I like it, but take that with a grain of salt. I've been accused of having bad taste, so.
I've heard about it over and over again, but I've never read it or seen it, so I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, the book's fantastic, undeniably good. It's the adaptation that some people didn't care for, but to me, I'm a sucker for anthology, and it's got a cool wraparound story, and I think visually I like it. But Jack Smite, the director of this episode, mostly was a TV guy, an anthology TV director.
Gotcha. So the rocket lands. Corry is ecstatic. He kind of jumps up from his bed. He's getting out a deck of cards. He gets out this handmade chess set. You find out later, but it looks like kind of a checkerboard. And he comes out and he's running out to the rocket. He's so excited to see him. He's like, "Hey, can we spend some time together? We can hang out." He's so craving that human contact, which of course is, it's one of those things that people have said comes with solitary confinement. And it's Allenby. It is Allenby, the one he's been waiting for. And there's 2 other, I guess, astronauts behind him. One is a very, very antagonistic character named Adams, who is played by Ted Knight.
Right. Who didn't get credited. I don't know why.
That's weird.
But, I don't, young Ted Knight.
He was known, he was doing voiceover stuff before that, and so like he was kind of, I think, just coming up at that time.
It's before his hair turned white.
Right, exactly. But it was wild because the way he said his lines was so like abrasive and antagonistic that he's really stood out as like because he starts talking about how bitter, or he's so bitter about having to be so far away from Earth to come see this convict,
Yeah.
I'm 8 months out of 12 away from Earth. Sometimes my kids don't even recognize me. He's so angry.
He plays that a lot. He was kind of known for, if you're a younger listener and you don't know who Ted Knight is, he's a comedic actor mostly. And I would say Mary Tyler Moore's Show is probably his best known, but then he had his own series called Too Close for Comfort, where he was the cartoonist dad with the young daughters, and he was always in Monroe, and he's always put out and upset about something.
Well, and he won 2 Emmys for Mary Tyler Moore. That's the Minnesota connection, by the way, Mary Tyler Moore Show.
There you go. Try to find one every episode.
Yeah, right. And he was also, for me, the primary place I recognized him was the villain in the movie Caddyshack, which so archetypal for the 80s. Just
dude, the best exchange is him in the pro shop where Rodney Dangerfield comes in, and he tells him, he's looking at the hat, and he says, "That looks like it comes free with a bowl of soup."
Looks good on you, though.
I love that shit.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Or his archetypal line of, "Well, we're waiting."
He's
so good.
So great. I like him. I would put him and Kevin McCarthy, who was in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or he was the villain in UHF who ran the station, I think, if I remember right. Him and Ted Knight, I think, are birds of a feather.
Yeah.
I would love to have seen them together.
What was a kick was that, he played that villain in the 80s, and way back in the late 50s, he still was using that same like character voice of the whoa,
Now I want to watch it again.
Yeah.
Just to focus on Ted Knight.
A lot of fun to hear his voice and his inflection, and he uses that character later on. So if you get a chance, check those out.
So this whole episode, The Lonelies, filmed in Death Valley.
Yeah.
Which which they did like 3 or 4 other times with the Twilight Zone, and they still, people still use Death Valley all the time. It's a very dramatic environment, but it's not a great place to work apparently because it's unbearably hot and miserable.
Well, and didn't they have some issues during the filming of this? Like
heat stroke and shit. Yeah, right. I think so. My understanding is they did. Yeah.
So as they're doing it, you can tell too, because as Ted Knight's describing this wretched place, that though he's describing it very beneficially for Corey, so clearly he's I always imagine him as being the you're a convict, so you deserve nothing good sort of character.
You were just talking if anything happened because of the heat. I forgot I made a note of this from the
Oh yeah.
trivia on IMDb that the director of photography, George T. Clemens, collapsed and was on a film crane and fell off
Jeez.
because of the heat.
Hopefully it wasn't up too high. That's
he didn't die.
Scary, right?
Yeah, I think they would have mentioned it, but no.
Well, there you go. And so Ted Knight's character, again, Adams, is basically just kind of harping on Corey, and he describes the place that he's at, an asteroid the size of 6,000 miles north to south and 4,000 miles east to west. And I was like, I wonder how big that is. So I was like, how big is the Earth? The Earth is almost 8,000 miles north to south and just 26 miles wider east to west because of the we're an obloid because we spin, so we swing out a little bit. Yeah. So that's from space.com. But so that means that it's almost, it's a little smaller than the Earth in one direction and about half as big as the Earth in the other direction, just the diameter wise. But Mars is 4,212 miles in diameter, according to NASA.gov. And so I'm just imagining this place, and I was kind of like, oh, so this is like a planet, it's that big. So he's in this one spot on this planet where no one else is. On the entire planet, he's the only person. That just stood out to me as like, wow, that's scary.
It's pairs so well with the episode that follows, Time Enough at Last, this idea of being incredibly lonely.
Yeah, the isolation and different perspectives of it. And so he's got a 50-year sentence, and all he's wanting is to be pardoned because we find out later he's talking to Allenby about this, and Allenby is like, hey, we can't stay long, and he's wanting to play a game of cards or anything with Allenby just to preserve a little bit more time with him. And Ted Knight, of course, steps up from the back and is again, oh, you didn't even ask him about the pardon. And he's like digging into him. And so Corey kind of sheepishly looks over at Allenby and he's like, yeah, no pardon. Sorry. And he's like, oh, and Allenby is like, people are suggesting that this kind of punishment is kind of cruel, which is foreshadowing for towards the end of the episode. And Corey says, I won't make it another 46 years. I can't do this. And Allenby is like, hey, by the way, I brought you a little something. And Corey's like, I don't want your little gifts. I don't want tidbits. He's like, I just want a pardon. I killed in self-defense. So they're trying to make Corey a little bit more relatable, a little bit more, bring out a little more humanity, like this idea that he killed in self-defense. And so he's not really guilty. He just was,
he's Con Air.
Right.
Just like Nicolas Cage. Oh, I want to note that the guy who plays Allenby, John Daner, he was in The Right Stuff. So he's got his astronaut bona fides there, but he was also in Airplane 2, the sequel, which also went to space.
Yes.
Since the theme.
Oh.
He had 302 credits. I think he's the winner of all of this cast. Yeah. By a lot.
And so yeah, Allenby plays a real thoughtful character. He's firm, but he's engaging. And Allenby kind of leans over to Corey and says, "Hey, could you just wait until we leave to open the crate so I don't get in trouble?" And they make clear that this crate is kind of heavy, so both the other astronauts have to go get it. And so that's when he tells them, just hey, wait till later. And he's like, "All right, well, we got to go. Sorry, Corey." And Corey says, "Well, have a good trip back. Give my regards to Broadway." And I was like, that's not the origin of that, saying, is it? I'm sure that's from somewhere else, but that's my ignorance of that phrase.
I think there was a song, "Give My Regards to Broadway." I think it was, I'm going to find out while you continue.
Oh, yeah, all good. So Corey's all butt hurt and he's mad. And so Allenby leaves and Corey just kind of goes, you can see his mind change a little bit, runs to the window and he says, "Hey, I don't much care what's in it, but for the thought, the decency, thank you. And Allenby kind of acknowledges that and walks away. So again, they're kind of establishing this relationship, which is so interesting to me. What stuck in my mind about this was the idea of how we think of convicts today, and how we think of convicts in this context, and what that means for how our minds process what it means to be a convict, right? And how it might be something that a lot of people could use a different perspective, that this is a human being that's had a life, that whatever, innocent, guilty, regardless. Like, how do we deal with that in our modern society? What's the best way to address that?
There's a kind of an attempt at kindness for him throughout. Like, the car was meant to keep him sane, and now this gift is also meant to help keep him sane. By the way, on the give my regards to Broadway, it's a song by George M. Cohan from his musical play Little Johnny Jones from 1904 in New York.
All right, well, there you go.
Yep. And he's through the English Derby, apparently, or he was accused of it, the character in the play. And,
gotcha.
He use more at your local library, the more you know.
Bong, 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 bong. We got to cue up that sound.
Yeah.
So he opens the box and he's got kind of a startled look on his face, and it clips to him reading a manual that basically describes that you are the owner of a robot, and it has feelings, it has sensations, it has emotions, just like a real person. It should have the relative lifespan of a human being, just all these things that basically he's doing all the exposition of. This is effectively a real person.
It has a replaceable filter, but its dustbin is usually full.
That's right. So
Alicia,
all of a sudden it pans over and her name is Alicia, and it pans over to her and she goes, "My name's Alicia. What's your name?"
Robot
in a
voice.
little bit of a robot tone, right? Yeah, which was great. And I don't know if they did some effect on it or if that was just her voice, but it had a very metallic kind of tone to it.
I think she was doing that. I really do. That's Jean Marsh, and it blew my mind that is Queen Bev Morta from Willow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not only was she in that in the 80s, she reprised that character, and I haven't watched the Willow TV series yet, but she's in the TV series for, I think, at least an episode as Queen Bev Morta.
Yeah. Well, and also I didn't realize, so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I read a little bit more. She co-created with another woman, Upstairs Downstairs, which I'm not sure if you ever heard of.
Yeah, I've seen it. I didn't know she was one of the creators.
Yeah, she co-created that and played and starred in it in a show in the character named Rose Buck from 1971 and 75, and then she would later go on to play in the BBC remake of it in 2010 to 2012.
Which essentially, right, Upstairs Downstairs was kind of like Downton Abbey, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was an inspiration for Downton Abbey, and the one of the executive producers of that was like, oh, how did he say it? Something to the effect of, I need to make Downton Abbey because there's two generations now who probably haven't seen Upstairs Downstairs. I'm paraphrasing, but
and the reference of Upstairs Downstairs is downstairs are servants, upstairs are the aristocracy, right?
Exactly. That's the shorthand for it. So and it won all kinds of awards. She won several awards for her work on that show, and then other shows. She invented another show, like she co-created another show. So this was just the very beginning of her acting career, but she was very, very active behind the scenes. So Jean Marsh,
worked with Hitchcock too on Frenzy.
Yeah,
and
was on Doctor Who too.
Oh, she was on Doctor Who. I didn't catch that one. I saw cool. She was the nurse in Return to Oz, the creepy nurse.
I've never seen Return to Oz. Everybody talks about it as a super creepy movie, but I have to.
I wonder what it would be like for someone. I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody who hadn't seen it as a kid who just went in as an adult. So I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say about it.
All right, I'll report back.
She had 184 titles as an actor too, so she was also
Wow.
very prolific.
Super busy. Well, that's awesome. And yet she was so good as Bev Morda. Like she was one of those characters that you don't forget. And it was
Yeah.
such a strong antagonist female like villain. Like it was like a strong villain that wasn't caricatured beyond, super sexualized or anything like that. Just like ooh, like that's a meaty role. That was
It felt like
super well done.
like a Disney, almost like is it Snow White?
Oh yeah,
Maleficent, is that Snow White or is that Sleeping
I
Beauty?
think so. Oh,
I
no,
get them mixed up.
That might be Sleeping. Yeah,
she has Queen Bev Morda is very Disney-esque to me, which is I think it's a Disney. Ultimately, it's a Disney movie anyway, so it makes sense. But
right,
she's just just very like over the top in the best way.
Yeah, right. And that was Ron Howard and George Lucas. They wanted to make a fantasy movie, so yeah.
Kevin Pollak
cool.
as Little Brownie. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Val Kilmer as Mad Mardigan, and Warwick Davis as Willow. Just so many. Oh,
Billy Barty's
it stands out.
in it.
Yeah, it's got its own mythology with it and stuff. And they later, like you said, the reprised it, made a TV show, right?
Yeah,
more modern.
Yeah, was within the past 5 years. I think that TV show came out on Disney Plus, and I it's funny. It's something I'd be like, oh my god, I can't believe it. I want to see it so bad, and then it's out, and I'm like, I don't have time to watch that.
Exactly. Same thing here with that and the Dark Crystal. I really want to get into that, and because I love that movie. That movie. So. All right, so
take a week off and catch up on all of our 80s reboots.
Exactly. New podcast coming soon. 80s reboots. So we go to commercial break, the fade back in, and Alicia is in his room. Oh, first his response to her is, "Get out of here." He's like, "Get out of here. I don't need a machine," And so he's very, very resistant at first. And like I said, we commercial break, fade out, come back, and she's in his little shack, and she offers him some water, but he's still angry. He won't even look at her. And he's just real frustrated and bitter, and is like, "Why did they build you a lie? Why didn't they make you out of metal and bolts and this and that?" Because he's conflicted, right?
Yeah.
Because he's seeing her as a woman. And he's like, "But you're a robot." And you can see the internal conflict with him. And clearly he's having some feelings and trying to navigate through it. And then they go outside, and he's like, "But you're like this heap." And he points to the car. And he's like, "But this heap doesn't mock me. I'm sick of being mocked by the memory of women." It's like, this is starting to sound a little incel. But he's clearly, he's been 4 years by himself. He's dealing with something.
Yeah,
and
it's the 60s.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
and so she
from perspective, at least.
Yeah, of the personality. And then she he kind of shoves her, and she falls down, and she starts crying. And in that moment, he's like, "Oh," you don't hear him say anything, but he stops, and he goes down, and he's like, "Okay, like, oh yeah, you have emotions. Like, you're actually experiencing sadness and fear and whatever it is that what am I doing?" And so there's a clip of like a montage where he's doing a voiceover, and he's like, "I don't know how to explain it, but my mind changed, and I'm in love with her, and nothing else matters."
Something tells me I'm into something good. Over that, like a Naked Gun.
Them skipping along in the desert and holding hands,
play acting movies for each other.
Yeah, but it's kind of sweet that it shows them at one point playing the made up chess game that he had shown from earlier, and so he's got companionship. He's got a partner, and he's really completely falling for her.
And he's also, it doesn't matter anymore to him. I think that he is stranded.
Right.
This is the key.
That nothing else matters piece is that, like, I'm good. Like, this is everything I needed. And he says something to the effect of like, she's everything. and
Yeah.
nothing else matters. So, yeah. And then they're laying out at night and looking at the stars, and he's being very patronizing, like, "Oh, that star is that, and that star is that." And she's like, "What's that star?" And he's like, "Well, that's a rocket." "Well, they'll be here by morning." And she's like, "Well, they're not due for another 3 months from the last time." And uh, he's like, "Well, I guess we'll see what's going on." So flip to morning, and Allenby is like running up with the other astronauts, and they're like running, not kind of casually coming up like they did last time. So the image is flipped of him running to them versus them running to him, and now he's the kind of the reluctant one. And they Allenby says, Corry, you've been pardoned. They reviewed all the cases, and you've been pardoned. We're here to take you back. But we have to leave in 20 minutes. We've been dodging meteor storms. We're low on fuel. We've got 7 other convicts or passengers, whatever, on the rocket, and we only have enough capacity for you and 15 pounds of your stuff. And he's like, 15 pounds? I haven't got 15 pounds of stuff. And he kind of is getting excited. He's like lifting off his possessions, and he's like, I got like a ledger and my shoes and my pen and I don't need any of the rest of the stuff. He said that car they can keep. That'll be for the next poor devil. And Allenby goes, oh well, there won't be any next poor devil. So, that's the they've outlawed this. This is cruel and unusual punishment to put somebody on an asteroid.
It sure is.
They don't say that, but yeah, that's the implication. And Allenby goes, or no, sorry, Corry goes, oh, good, I'm glad of that. And Alicia will climb into that ship of yours, and we'll look out the port, and we'll give it all a big kiss goodbye. And Allenby's like, oh no, his face falls. And Adams, Ted Knight, again, who's Corry or who's Alicia? And Allenby goes, oh my dear God, I forgot her.
Whoopsie daisy.
And Corey's like, what so, she's, Alicia, and Adams is like, what is he talking about? He's crazy. And Allenby goes, she's a robot.
I love how they said robot back then.
It's not robot. It was robot. And yeah. And he's all like, oh no. And Corey's like, no, she's a woman. She's not a robot. She's a woman. And they start having this argument. And Allenby's like, no, dude, seriously, she's a robot. She's a robot. We got to go. You only have 15 pounds stuff to bring. She's not coming. And he's like, no, like she's a woman. She's coming with. She's got to come with, And he starts running after, trying to find her to kind of prove to them, show them all, talk to them that she's a woman. And so they're running from here to there. There's a chase scene. They find her out in one of the fields of rocks, and he's like, show them all, show them you're a woman. And Allenby goes, I don't have any choice, Corry. I have no choice at all. And Alicia's like, Corry? And Allenby pulls out a gun and shoots Alicia.
In the face, right?
Yeah, in the face. Dang. And Corey's like, oh. And a moment later, they show Alicia on the ground. They pan up to show the human, and then the wiring and circuitry of the face of the robot.
And the way they track the wires, they go circular around where the eyes were.
Yeah.
Which they say was like a compromise, I guess, to make it less creepy. It's still creepy, but like I think they were going to put orbs in there originally, and they were like, it's too much. People can't handle it.
Right. Which is funny to think about, like what would pass now versus what would pass then. And yeah, they just have kind of circles that give you the idea of eyes without being like a full on skull with eyeball sockets.
Not too human.
And she's doing the Corry, repeating his name, glitching
So
out.
sad.
And it's just this moment where he's stunned, and he's like lost, like, right, because everything he knew or everything he thought he knew or everything he had accepted, flipping back to his statement from the beginning of, um, can I even believe in myself anymore? You know, what's left that I can believe in? Now, the one thing he decided and had accepted and believed in has been blown up as a robot. And Allenby's talking the whole time, like, "Hey, no, like you're gonna go home. You're gonna be home, and you're gonna be fine. It's gonna be great." And he said, "All you're leaving behind is loneliness." And Corey's like, kind of nods, and he's like, I must remember that. I must remember to keep that in mind." And then they kind of slowly walk off, and it's just like, ooh,
Yeah.
ouch.
And then
He looks broken.
you get I think I can't remember what season it is, but you get what the Mighty Casey, and it's the second time that the actor Jack Warden gets to play opposite another humanoid robot. This time it's a baseball
Yeah,
player. But yeah,
yeah,
I think
and
it's such a fun connection too, that they're like, yeah,
right.
it's a robot episode. Let's bring Jack Warden back.
And what's interesting about it, I was kind of reflecting on this too, the idea of at the end, what a gut punch to shoot his partner in the face. And then I was like, and he's a convict, and it's a punishment.
Yeah.
Like that fits. I mean, that holds, that it was one more like, hey, well, we're gonna release you. But remember that paradise you thought you had with this person? Yeah, she's a robot.
It's the
Remember?
worst punishment of all. Like, he finally fell into happiness,
Exactly.
and he doesn't care
Exactly.
about going back to Earth
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Yeah. I
Oof.
think it was Star Trek that, I could be wrong, it might have been a different sci-fi series that did a similar, like, what if they'd stayed together kind of story, where
Oh.
the character is an older man, much older, and he has a young robot that they think is his daughter.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's played off as his daughter, but then they eventually reveal that he created her because he was so lonely,
Sure.
and that he just happened to age and she didn't.
Right.
So
Right.
you could see the fingerprints of this episode on a lot of future sci-fi too.
Right. And
come.
the outro was on a microscopic piece of sand that floats through space is a fragment of a man's life. Left to rust is the place he lived in and the machines he used. Without use, they will disintegrate from the wind and the sand and the years that act upon them. All of Mr. Corry's machines, including the one made in his image, kept alive by love, but now obsolete in the Twilight Zone.
Beautiful. Beautifully said, Joe.
Well,
Well read, sir.
that's Rod Serling. That's Rod Serling for you.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the image kept alive by love, so that piece of it, it made in his image, a lot of, like, biblical Adam a symbolism there. But yeah, just it's interesting, and I think we'll see something similar to this in a different way, and I look forward to talking about it in the next episode,
Yeah.
where it's kind of like oh man, but
The flip,
know.
but also the punch to the gut at the end. But it's
Right.
the motivations when we get into next week. Burgess Meredith's character wants to be alone ultimately, and it shows like how both of those things don't necessarily work out because it's the Twilight Zone. I think that was great. Joe, you have anything else to say about The Lonely?
No, I think we covered it fairly well. I think it's interesting to see how they tie into space with a lot of this stuff too, and I think we'll see that in more episodes as we go along. That the piece with astronauts and all that, with that kind of burgeoning right before the space race in the '60s happens. So
Yeah.
a lot of really interesting tie-ins there.
It was funny too that this aired on Friday the 13th, but you would think they would take advantage of that date maybe to do a different kind of story instead of a sci-fi story. But I don't know if they were that in tune with how it was all going to lay out.
Sure.
This is episode 6, right? And this is the end of establishing what the Twilight Zone is. I would say episodes 1 through 6. They are the Rod's purely one man, not one man show, Rod Serling, but really they are the things that are most purely from his creative point of view. And then starting next week with Time Enough at Last, we start getting input from outside authors and things start to evolve. So this is, I think, this is like the purest, like baby infant state of Twilight Zone, these first 6.
Yeah. Well, actually, it looks like this is 7.
Or this one was 7. Okay.
Yeah. But even same thing holds. It's that first few episodes that are kind of like setting the tone for this is the kind of show this is going to be. Here's some of the variety of things you might see in this show.
Yeah.
In variations.
It's funny. Next week, not only do we get a new writer, we get a new composer. So like they're taking chances next time on Time Enough.
Right. What I found out too, this was the first show that was in production after it aired. So in other words, this was the first show they started making after they knew probably they had a hit, or that after it started being on the air.
This episode?
I believe so.
Lonely?
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. I have nothing else to add. I really like this episode. I love how bittersweet it is.
Yeah.
And acted beautifully. So we'll be back next week with Time Enough at Last, starring Burgess Meredith, the beginning of a collaboration with other writers and composers and actors. And Burgess Meredith's kind of a longtime actor. And the director who's taken over next week, John Bram, becomes a Twilight Zone staple. So I'm excited to get into that one.
It's such a classic.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.